One of my family's favorite songs, maybe you've heard the song, maybe you haven't, and we like to sing it together a lot of times in the car. We like to sing, I think the name of the song is My God is So Big, okay? Maybe you've heard that song, but it goes like this. My God is so big, so strong, and so mighty, there's nothing that my God can't do, okay? Catchy, right? Okay? But we really like this part. At the end of the song, there's kind of a refrain at the end as a question, and the singer says, how big? And that's when you're supposed to say, so big. And then the singer will go, how mighty? And then you say, almighty, okay? I've been living with preschoolers for years, okay? It's a wonderful thing. But, hey, I want your help, okay? Now, I just told you what to do, okay? I'm going to ask you. So when I say how big, you say so big. Are you ready? How big? So big. We could work on the so's. Just lengthen it out a little bit, but it was pretty good. Here's another chance. I say how mighty, you say almighty. You ready? How mighty? Almighty. That's right. That's right. And that's what we like, and we just have that moment in the car, okay? Now, many of us grew up in church, or you have come to church, taking your kids to church because you want them to have a foundation. Maybe you've recently returned to church and you remember some of the songs you've learned. But as kids or even as parents, maybe we didn't go to church growing up, we've heard songs like that. We've sung songs like that. And when you're a child, when you sing that song, it just seems so true, right? And so good and so wonderful. I mean, you grow up grow up singing those songs, but then you grow up. And then you start to wonder, is God really so mighty? Is all of this true? It seemed so good when I was 6. I didn't even think to question it, but now I wonder, is God really above and behind all things and all history? Is he really working out all things for my good? Because if God is so mighty, then why am I feeling this way? If God is so powerful, then why am I in dismay? Why do I find myself struggling? Why am I in an uphill battle with anxiety? Why am I fighting this addiction? Why am I struggling to change? Why is there this pain in my life? Physical or emotional or relational? And not only me, I'm struggling, but why are they struggling? Why are they facing that sickness? And why are my friends going through that marriage difficulty? Why am I watching my parents end a 30-year marriage? And why is the world struggling? I mean, we look out and we see things and we go, our world could do without that. Why does God allow that? We grew up singing, my God is so big, so strong, and so mighty, and then we start to feel and experience some of the things that are happening in the real world, and we start to experience an emotion in our soul. And the word for this is dismay. We look out at the world, or we look in ourselves, and we feel dismayed. We feel down. We feel defeated. And dismay leads to doubt. And what I wonder is there a way out of that feeling? Is there a way out of doubt? Is there a way out of wondering, is God really who he says he is? Now, last week we opened this sermon series with Isaiah chapter 9, which is a very important Christmas text. It's an announcement. It's an announcement to a bad king in a deteriorating kingdom. It's an announcement to a real world that is in dismay. that doesn't have joy, that doesn't have hope, that definitely doesn't have peace externally or internally. And Isaiah says that Jesus, he's forecasting Jesus is going to come into this real world in dismay. That God himself is going to break into it. That he's going to, in the flesh, God is going to put on humanity and come to the real world. The ideal is going to step into the real world. And we talked about one of these titles given to this future promised king, who is Jesus, as a wonderful counselor. And we said, what is a wonderful counselor? Well, a wonderful counselor is someone who shows a permanent way out. Not a temporary way out, a permanent way out of present problems. We talked about how the problem we look out and see in the world is worse than we think. We talked about how the problem in us is way worse than we think. But we also talked about how Christmas shows us that God loves us more than we think. And Isaiah chapter 9, let me read it to you before we get going. Verse 6 and 7 says, "For to us a child is born. To us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor." There's a permanent way out. "Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this." If this is true, then why do I feel the way I do? See, this text says, it's a Christmas text, it says that there is a way out of dismay. And it's this person, it's this figure on whom the government will rest. It's this child. And the name I want to look at today that's given is Mighty God. Mighty God. What does this mean? Who is Isaiah telling us that this God come to rescue us eternally is? Now, the word mighty means Gabor. It's the Hebrew word for Gabor. Okay, so let's say that together. Gabor. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Good job. It means strong, but strong in the sense of battle strong or brave or valiant, like a warrior, okay? Really, this word means a champion. Like a champion because they're bold, they're audacious, they're confident. That's what this word means, a champion. Now, when we say champion, another champion might come to mind when you're thinking about the Bible. And it's a very famous biblical text, and it's the story that transcends all cultures, really, the story of David and Goliath. Now, I want you to turn to 1 Samuel 17. We're gonna be cruising through some verses in this text. Such a wonderful text about a champion. Now, the Philistines gathered their forces, this is verse 1, for war, and assembled at Sokah in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Sokah and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites, Saul's the king of Israel, assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines, the enemy, the one trying to step in and take them out. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley in between them. And a champion, Gabor, named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. Now you have to imagine him. His height was 6 cubits in a span. In the early Masoretic text, which is the Hebrew text, it says 9 foot 6 inches. And the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it says 6 foot 9 inches. Either way, a giant. Okay? A giant. He had a bronze helmet on his head. Do you know how heavy bronze is? He wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood, and he shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man, and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all of the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Why? This is the very same group of people that has seen God's mighty hand in previous battles. This is the same group of people who saw God win them a united kingdom. This is the very same group of people that knew what their God could do. And here they are, maybe a few years removed, a few decades removed, and they are terrified at this opponent challenging them. Because Goliath, he's a champion. Gabor, he's mighty. He's undefeated. He's proud. He's fierce. He's daunting. All of us have come onto a battlefield and have heard the giant of doubt calling us out. Maybe at some point in your past, you can recall a time when you had a bout with doubt and how difficult and trying and dismaying that was. Maybe right now, you're in the middle of a taunt from the giant, calling you out, calling your faith out, questioning your every move. Doubt seeks to diminish and defy our confidence in God. That's what's happening here. And we all know what that feels like. And the giant tells us what's at stake. Either we're going to serve him or he's going to serve us. We're going to be subject to doubt and to it crushing our confidence in God. We're going to be forced to submit if it becomes that big. Now listen, verse 16, for 40 days, the Philistine, this giant, this champion, came forward every morning and evening, and he took his stand. I don't know how long you've been hearing the shouts of doubt, but I know what it feels like to wake up and wonder, where's God? I know what it feels like for that to not let up all day long. I know what it feels like to wonder where God is when you struggle to fall to sleep because the weight is so incredibly hard to bear, or the pain is just too much, or the mental anguish you're in is too much of a struggle. For 40 days, nothing but shouts and taunts and dismay. Now, Jesus in the Gospels asks his followers 4 or 5 times, hey, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? And what's important for us when we think about those conversations, Jesus isn't necessarily saying, throwing shame on them for doubting. He understands that they're going to doubt. He's not angry at their doubt. He's saddened that they're doubting. Because when he says, where's your faith? Why is your faith so small? He's saying, why are you losing confidence in who I am? And when you lose confidence in who I am, you start to lose confidence in what I say and what I say about you. And so when we're doubting, we're getting this idea that there's something in us that's strongly opposing us, that's trying to take down our confidence so that we're in dismay. See, the giant of doubt, does a few things very consistently. The giant of doubt will attack who you are, and he'll tear you down. The giant of doubt will also attack who God is, and he'll knock him down the size. And maybe most importantly, he'll start to talk about what God can't do. See, the giant stands in strength and shouts 3 deflating taunts. And these taunts summarize our doubts, and they're powerful and they're strong. The first one that you hear quite often is God is far. He's far. You see, God is so holy, he's so perfect, he's so above, he's so beyond, he's so high that he can't possibly want anything to do with us. In fact, sometimes God isn't acting because you're getting what you deserve. God is far. And we hear that taunt, not only is God far, but he doesn't want to come near to you and help you. You're getting what you deserve. You're too bad. You've done too much. You're too far gone. And so when we hear God is far, what's happening is the enemy, the giant of doubt, is trying to tell you you're nothing. You're nothing. See, your God's not here. If he thought you were something, he would defend you. He would come alongside of you. Now, Christianity is the only religion, it's the only one that has this idea. God is holy. He's far. He's above. He's powerful. And he became human. He's near. He comes near. You see, most of Western religion, like Judaism and Islam, they would say that God is far too perfect to subject himself to humanity. And if you play your cards right, maybe you'll get into heaven someday. And Eastern religions, like Buddhism and Hinduism and the like, well, there's no need for God to become human because God's already here. And if you look in enough, you can become God yourself. You can discover it. You can discover yourself. You can get in touch with the God that's already here. God is far. The second taunt you hear is God is not fair. And this is the enemy taking a shot at God's character. And it sounds like this: he cannot be good and trusted. Otherwise, he would stop that thing, help you when you ask, heal that sickness. I mean, why does he act here and not there? Why does he show up for her and not for him? If I ever have a conversation with God, he's probably got some explaining to do. And you hear it in the back of your mind. God is not fair. He's flawed. He's not faithful. He may be real, but it begins to make you question, is he who the Bible actually reveals? Because when you look at what the Bible says and you look at life, you might be tempted to think, well, either he can't, or he won't, or he doesn't love us enough to. God is not fair. There's something flawed in our revelation about who God is, and so I can't trust him. I can't believe in him. The third taunt we hear is God is fake. He's fake. He can't because he's not. If God is here, then why do we fear? Why do we struggle? Why do we doubt? You know, one famous thinker at the end of the 19th century is Friedrich Nietzsche. Most people in the postmodern world don't realize that their basis of morals in life is really on the foundation of his philosophy. And he wrote a book called Beyond Good and Evil. And here's what he does. He encourages us to step fully out into doubt, to acknowledge there is nothing above, only what's here. He tells us to embrace this and to find purpose within in all aspects of life, even in the suffering and pain we experience. It's a part of it, and we should pull something out of it. And so he encourages people in his philosophy, While you're alive, it's all there is. So do what fulfills you. Do what brings you meaning. Find yourself. Be hypercritical of any absolutely true idea. Just get in touch with you and your truth. Ultimately, he concluded that God is not real. And how did that work out for Frederick? Well, in his later years, he started to lose his mind. And he committed suicide. See, every evening and morning, this is a part of our human story. The giant is taunting you. Maybe it's been weeks, maybe it's been months, maybe it's been years, and all we hear is, where is God? Or God doesn't, or God won't. You see, the doubts we feel, they boast to us, and they oftentimes feel stronger than we are. I mean, we try to fight the giant, right? And the giant says to us, really? You? Remember the last time you tried to conquer me? Remember the last time you tried to get your life in order? Remember the last time you tried to be faithful to God? I took you out. You're no match for me. I'm a champion. I'm mighty. And you are without a champion. He doesn't care. He's not near. He certainly doesn't hear. And on top of that, he's not even real. See, they were dismayed. The Israelites were dismayed, much like we're dismayed. They were dismayed because the giant was taunting. And this taps into our age-old problem, what helps us understand why doubt is present in the world. And so I want to show you something that we isolate from Genesis chapter 3, one of the most important chapters in the Bible, because it tells you everything you need to know about the struggle in the world and the struggle in you. And I'm going to call this the doubt and dismay cycle. And so you know Genesis 3, where there's the temptation, and then Adam and Eve, humanity, representing humanity, succumb to the temptation. And then there is shame that falls on them, and then separation from the presence of God. And here's how it works. The first part of this cycle, and you know this cycle, this is what leads us to dismay, is doubt. The enemy, the giant, came into the garden, into the world, and he tried to get us to doubt. It sounds like this, and this is what it sounded like in Genesis 3. Are you sure God is really who he says he is? Are you sure? And that's what the enemy was doing with Adam and Eve, getting them to question something about God. Are you sure he's telling you the truth? And the goal in this stage is just to get us to doubt something true about God. Not all of God, just one thing. You see, the giant's not interested in getting you to doubt God in one day. He just wants to chip at it. He wants to chip at your faith one by one. Just doubt something insufficient. And so in doing so, he starts to coax us to feel insufficient about what we believe, to feel insecure or unsure. And this is his tactic, to get us to question. Why does he do this? Because he's evil. That's why. He's the antithesis of God. See, God creates and the enemy destroys. He just wants to get us to doubt a little bit. Just one thing that we don't want to hold as true that will reveal about who God is. Now, you have to understand this. Doubts themselves are not wrong. If you're experiencing doubt, it doesn't mean you're sinning. It just means you're struggling. It just means the giant is coming for you. But watch what happens when the turn goes from doubting to sinning. The second thing is deceive. Are you sure God said that you shouldn't eat from this tree? And this sounds like God isn't really who he says he is. So now that the enemy, the giant, has gotten you to doubt something about God, now he can turn it onto us doubting who God actually is and start to believe that maybe the thing untrue that we're doubting is actually true. Oh, God really doesn't have my best in mind. He's holding out on me. We start to wonder, well, maybe God's wrong about this. Well, maybe God, is wrong about how this should work. Maybe I got it wrong, and maybe I just, and we start to just get deceived a little bit and think, oh, well, if I'm not sure if that's true, and maybe he really isn't that way, and then finally it leads to the third part of the cycle, which is desire. Well, because God isn't really who I thought he was, I think it's better for me to, fill in the blank. I think it's better for me to act like this. I think it's better for me to make my own rules. I think it's better for me to approach marriage the way I want. I think it's better for me to approach life the way I want, because I'm just not sure that God is who he says he is. See, when doubt comes in and then we become deceived by it and we start to desire to do the opposite of what God says, the giant of doubt has won, because it opens the door to what it's really trying to do, which is to get you to serve the giant of sin. And when we open that door, it steps in and we act on it and we do something, and it's fueled by doubt and deception. And where do we end up on the other side of a sinful decision? In dismay. And dismay. And we become subject to shame and fear because we doubted, and it led us to actually believe what we doubted, and then we desired to do something we shouldn't do, and here we are. And some of us broken. We've been so broken because of the desires and where they have led us. And we wonder, is there a way out? Or we feel so trapped in that even if we get it together, we're kind of a realist, and we go, well, I might get it together in my life, but then I'm going to die. And the cycle goes again and again and again. In dismay, we doubt either we can get better or God's real. We're deceived by it. We desire to do wrong again, and then it ends up in the same place. And we're just stuck in this over and over and over. What this is us serving the giant of sin and death. It leaves us feeling powerless, passionless, and purposeless. Is the giant, is he taunting you? Is he trying to take you out? Let's finish the story. David, the youngest of 7 brothers, he's a shepherd. And he comes to the battlefield from where? From Bethlehem. And he's there because his father wants him to bring provisions to help his brothers and to get an update for his father on how everyone is doing. Let's read 1 Samuel 21 and following. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. And whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Verse 26, David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? And I love what David does here. He said, who is this? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Who is this giant that he should defy the armies of not a dead God, but a living God? When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, David, why are you here? Why'd you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came only to watch the battle. Now what have I done, said David. Can't I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, Listen to the resolve in David, the confidence in David. Let no one lose heart. Let no one be dismayed. Let no one be taunted by this giant on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied right to David's face, you're not able to go against this giant and fight him. You are only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. And David hears the taunting, right? And he asks, who's this person that has the audacity to taunt who God is? He's angry, isn't he? He's so angry at the state of the armies and at just the gall of Goliath. He almost immediately, as that confidence begins to stir up in him, begins to hear voices of doubt, doesn't he? His brother begins to say, hey, your character, why are you here? And you're not really concerned about any of this. Why'd you even come? And then Saul's like, he's like, you're not even able. Like, you're not powerful. You can't even wear my, armor to go into battle. Traditionally, you've heard this story, and you've heard yourself as David. And I'm here to clear that up a little bit because I think that will help. You are not David. You cannot beat Goliath. He's undefeated. Sin and death is undefeated. And you've heard, hey, if you just get a little braver, you believe a little harder, you go to church a little more, then the giant can fall. But you are not David. Who are you? You are Saul, the one that's afraid. I am the brothers of David. We are the Israelites. We're doubting we can overcome, and we're wondering where God is. You see, to understand this story, you have to understand that David is a foreshadowing of Jesus. Whose throne does the mighty God sit on? David's throne. Forever and ever and ever. And in this story, we see so clearly the occasion of Christmas and Jesus coming to the battlefield from Bethlehem, being subjected to the same taunts and the same doubts. Why are you here? You're not good. You would have been here the whole time if you were really into this, Jesus. You see, what we learn from this story, if we kind of line them up, is Jesus hears. He hears the fears that you're going through. He hears so clearly the dismay and the battle in your soul. He hears the taunts, and he cares. Jesus cares. In fact, he doesn't just care about what's happening to you, he's angry about it. He's angry that the giant has the audacity to push you down and subject you to himself. See, and then he nears. He nears. He steps into our story, into our humanity, into our battle, literally subjecting himself to the very same doubts and the very same battle we experience. Verse 40 of 1 Samuel 17, then he took his staff. And we should see David, but we should see further and see Jesus in this. Then he took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of the shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached the giant. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was a little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. What is happening when Jesus steps into humanity? Satan and the powers of evil, the giants of sin and fear and death, well, they gave Jesus their best shot. Who are you coming at me? In a human body? On my turf? Come on over here. I've taken care of every other human. I'll take care of you as well. And when we read this, we can't help but think about when Jesus began his ministry and spent 40 days subjected to the taunts and the temptations of the enemy. And then we can't help but think about Jesus' suffering, every leg of the cross. Everything was thrown at Jesus. He was exhausted physically, just like we are. He was exposed to the doubts. And he even offers Jesus an easy way out. But what we have to see in this story is so amazing, okay? David approaches the Goliath with a sling and a stone. And the writers want us to see how stupid this is. That stone isn't going to take out a giant. Goliath has armor, and he's 9 feet tall, and he's wearing bronze, and he has a sword and an armor bearer. We're supposed to see the ridiculousness of David 100% depending on God for his victory. Verse 45, David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give to the carcasses of the Philistine army, to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by my sword or my spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give it all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle to meet him. Reaching into his bag, taking out a stone, he slung and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and very important, without a sword in his hand. He struck down the giant and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took a hold of the Philistine's sword, he drew it from his sheath, and he killed him. And he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw their hero was dead, they turned and they ran. Jesus comes into the world, into the battle line, not just to comfort you and me in our doubts, but to confront the very giant that causes them. The giant falls because Jesus wins. And the God that you know, the Almighty, came into the flesh. And how does he win? He surrenders to death. He surrenders out of love. He cuts off the power of the giant with its own sword. Can you hear it? By surrendering his life and dying by the powers of this world, in his mighty surrender, we see his ultimate display of strength. You see, God is so mighty, he doesn't need a weapon. He is who he is. And he achieves the greatest victory of all. You see, the Almighty is the most mighty because he enters in, and it's not even a problem for him to win. He enters in. Christmas happens because he wants to remove all doubt in your mind and my mind that he is mighty and that he loves you. He steps to the battlefield and he surrenders himself. He subjects himself to the giant. And in doing so, he conquers the thing that plagues us all. Here is your champion. Here he is. He's here. and he has won. You may not always understand how or what's behind why God is allowing, but we can understand through Jesus entering humanity and dying on a cross that God is, that God cares, that God is able, and that God wants to. He comes because he hears all the doubts, he cares about the struggles, and he comes for two purposes. One, to slay the giant, and to restore you to an everlasting life with him. He's so mighty. You have nothing to fear because the Almighty is here. The Almighty became the most lowly so that he could achieve a great victory. And because of that, because Jesus took on the giant of sin and death, every other giant has to fall. And so I don't know what you walked in here with today, but I know if it's the giant of addiction, it has to fall. I know if it's a giant of depression, because of what Jesus did, it has to fall. If it's a giant of anger, it has to fall. If it's any giant of sin, it has to fall. Maybe it's a giant of sickness. See, Jesus entered the world and he took on human flesh and he looked the giant right in the face and he took our death and our sin so that we could have a victory. He's a mighty God. He is able to save. He cares, he nears, he loves, and you can have full confidence in him because of what he gave up for you. Can somebody praise the mighty God today? Come on. Someone here, I've been praying about it all morning. There's someone that needs to come to their champion, to get free from sin, to get free from addiction, and just surrender. You're under a weight of doubt, and you just need to come to him. You just need to come to him. And when you do, understand, you're not saved because of anything you do, only because of how he surrendered his life for you. And so if you want to do that, I invite you to pray in your seat or to go with someone at 103, ask them about how you can make a relationship with Jesus possible. And as we sing, I want you to think of the giant. And I want you to sing your victory over him. No longer will you face his taunts because Jesus came and he's victorious. We're going to sing about that together. Would you stand up? God, I pray to you because you are mighty, you are holy, but it wasn't too much for you to step into our world, into our brokenness, face every doubt we face. You looked at the cross and you willingly put yourself up on it so that we could be free. And because of that, every giant must fall. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.